Husband left ex-wife at an abandoned farm with only a sack of corn and an old stove. If you want to eat, you'll have to cook. Years later, she returns transformed, and he regrets it. Lauren woke up to the persistent sound of the wall clock, the same one that had marked her mornings for 20 years. It was 6:45. In the stillness of the large, cold house, she slipped her feet into her fluffy slippers, crossed the hallway, and headed straight for the kitchen. She lit the stove, ground the coffee fresh as she always did, and sliced the chorizo with the precision of someone who knew the rituals of the home. The table was set, with warm bread and homemade jam. She glanced at the clock again. It was 7 o'clock. Evan always came downstairs at this time. She heard heavy footsteps on the stairs. The sound was familiar, but there was something different about today. Evan appeared, his phone glued to his face. He didn't say good morning, nor did he look at her. He sat at the table, still focused on the screen, took a sip of coffee, and then, without removing his eyes from the display, said coldly, "I want a divorce. I'm seeing someone else." Lauren stood frozen, holding the spatula still dirty with grease, unsure if she had heard him correctly. What had he just said? "What do you mean?" she whispered, trying to find hesitation or some explanation in his face. Finally, Evan looked at her. His gaze was empty, without a trace of guilt. "I fell in love with someone else, someone younger, lighter. You, Lauren, you've become dead weight. You're just taking up space." She felt as though she had been struck physically, as though the ground had given way beneath her feet. Before she could react, he pulled a folder from his bag. He opened it calmly, as if in a business meeting, and placed a stack of documents on the table, nudging the bread aside with the edge of the paper. "It's all signed. This," he pointed to the papers, "is the agreement. You're not entitled to anything. Not the house, not the company, not the cars." Lauren flipped through the pages with trembling hands. "You can't do this. I've been here all these years," she protested, her voice faltering. "You didn't contribute financially. I built everything. You just took care of the house." "That's not an asset," he said, standing up. She wanted to argue, beg, demand an explanation, but he didn't give her the space. Evan walked over to the sideboard, grabbed a small black briefcase, and spoke with complete indifference. "My flight to Cancun leaves in 3 hours. I don't have time for anything else. You're starting a new life, Lauren. And you're going to the farm in Oaxaca. I've already arranged that." "Oaxaca?" she repeated, completely lost. "You'll go now. The driver is waiting outside. You don't need to pack. I've already set aside the essentials." With the same coldness, he picked up his phone and made a quick call. Lauren, still in shock, followed him to the door. The driver was already standing by the open trunk. She got into the car with only a small bag, a sack of corn, and an old wood stove that she had insisted on keeping. No clothes, no photographs, nothing to tie her to the life she had just lost. During the hours on the road, Lauren didn't speak a word. The dry landscape along the road to Oaxaca passed by her like a silent film. She rested her forehead against the window, feeling the sun's heat beating directly, but inside, she was frozen. She thought about everything and nothing at once. When they finally arrived, it was nearly evening. The farm was covered in tall weeds, the gates were broken, the windows ripped out. There was no sign of electricity, nor water. The place was abandoned, forgotten by time. Lauren pushed the door open with effort. The only thing she found was the dirt floor, damp and musty. She dropped her bag in the corner, sat on the floor, and began to cry. She cried silently, as if not wanting to disturb even the ruins around her. There, for the first time in 20 years, she was completely alone. Lauren, without furniture, without light, without food, wrapped herself in the only thin blanket she found in a cupboard full of termites. The cold didn't just come from the wind that cut through the cracks in the rotten wooden walls, but from the cruel silence that surrounded her, only interrupted by the creaks of the brush and sounds she couldn't identify. She tried to close her eyes. Her empty stomach ached. Fear was a constant presence. Every noise sounded like an animal coming closer, and every memory felt like a knife, cutting slowly. This was the first night of a life she hadn't chosen, a life that had been pushed upon her without warning, without preparation, without choice. When the sun finally appeared behind the twisted trees, Lauren was already standing. Her eyes burned from keeping vigil in the dark. Her skin still carried the cold from the early morning. She put on the same clothes from the day before and walked along the dirt road, not exactly knowing where she was going. After nearly an hour of walking, she found a small village with a few houses and a small square surrounded by low-roofed shops. No one recognized her. No one greeted her. With the coins left at the bottom of her bag, Lauren entered a narrow store and bought a box of matches. The attendant, a thin, silent man, watched her with curiosity but didn't ask any questions. She returned home, carrying the matches as if they were gold. Carefully, she piled a few dry branches she found in the yard and for the first time rekindled the old wood stove. The sack of corn was still there, intact. She decided to make tamales. She mixed the dough with her hands slowly, sitting on an improvised bench, crying silently. The smell of the burning wood brought memories that suffocated her. Her mother in the kitchen, the laughter of her sisters, Sundays with the family. It was a life that seemed like it belonged to another century. For the first time, she truly felt the weight of loneliness. There, in the middle of nowhere, with dough-streaked hands and tears on her face, Lauren understood that no one was waiting for her anywhere. The tamales were ready by 10 in the morning. She grabbed an old box, one of those used at the market, placed a cloth over it, and arranged the tamales carefully. She walked to the village again, this time with slower, almost dragging steps. When she arrived at the square, she positioned herself in a corner near a closed magazine stand. People passed by, glanced at her sideways, but no one approached. She stood there for more than half an hour, trying to smile, trying to look confident. But the shame weighed heavy in her chest. It was a child about 8 years old who stopped first. He looked at the tamales and said in a low voice, "I have a coin. Can I buy one?" Lauren nodded, her eyes welling up. The child took the tamale carefully, took a bite, and after chewing a little, smiled. An older man who had been watching from a distance approached, bought one as well, took 2 bites and raised his eyebrows. "Tastes like home." That sentence was like a warm breath in the winter. Slowly, more people came. And by noon, Lauren had nothing left in the box. She returned home with a few coins in her pocket, but for the first time since Evan's cruel words, there was something different inside her. A spark. She bought more corn, cooked again, tried mixing chili with fresh cheese, just like she had learned from an aunt in San Cristobal. The smell was strong, enticing, and there was pride in what she did. It wasn't just food. It was history, memory, identity. In the following days, people began seeking her out. No one knew her full name, but they simply asked, "Where's the woman with the tamales?" She heard that and, despite still being scared, smiled. She wasn't sure what she was building, but it was the first time she felt seen by someone who didn't expect anything in return. With some old planks and help from a local carpenter, she set up a small stand by the square. She covered it with a floral tablecloth she had brought from the old house and wrote, with a blue pen, on a piece of cardboard, "Homemade Flavors by Lauren." She looked at it with a mix of fear and hope. She didn't know if it would work, but it was the beginning of something. For the first time, she wasn't just what she had lost. If you're watching this far, I'm sure you're liking it, so I want to ask you to subscribe to the channel. The handwritten cardboard sign was already fading in the sun when Lauren realized that people were coming back. Some customers arrived early, greeted her by name, and ordered the same flavor from the previous week. Others came by word of mouth, from neighbors or relatives. An older man mentioned that his granddaughter only wanted the cheese and chili tamales. A woman brought her daughter and said it was the only food the girl ate without complaining. The faces were repeating, and with them, a silent bond was beginning to form. Lauren didn't know it, but she was creating a routine for the village and for herself. One Thursday morning, while organizing the stand, a woman with her hair tied up in a firm bun approached. She had a direct gaze and a small notebook in her hands. She ordered 20 tamales for a birthday party. She wanted sweet and savory ones, half of each. Lauren agreed without much thought. She gave a wide smile, wrote the order down in an old notebook, and for the first time felt like she was part of something that could grow. The next morning, the makeshift alarm clock rang at 4. It was just the sound of the firewood being arranged and the distant crowing of roosters. Lauren got up, put water to boil, and separated the ingredients. She mixed the dough while thinking about the balance between sweet and savory. She decided to try a tamale with cinnamon and plantains, and another with cured cheese and caramelized onions. She worked until the sun rose, with steady hands and attentive eyes. She delivered the tamales at the agreed time, each wrapped carefully, as if it were a gift. The smile on her face was genuine. It wasn't about money, it was dignity. With the payment for that order, she went to a store in the center and bought a small white cooler. It was simple, but enough to keep the ingredients fresh for a longer time. This changed everything. She could prepare more tamales without worrying about losing the food to the heat. Little by little, the stand began to draw more attention. It gained color, it gained smell, it gained stories. A few days later, a young man with a cap and a microphone around his neck showed up at the square. He was from the local radio. He said he had heard about the tamales and wanted to try them. He sat on the nearby bench, ate in silence, and before leaving, he winked at her. "These flavors have soul. People will talk about you." The next day, the line started before 8 in the morning. Lauren could barely serve everyone. People from other neighborhoods, people she had never seen before, started arriving, asking, "Is this Lauren's tamale stand?" She tried to keep calm, to smile. But when she saw the line winding around the square, she realized she couldn't handle it on her own. She asked a neighbor, with whom she had exchanged a few words before, for help. She offered part of the profits. The response was brief. "I don't want to get involved in anyone's problems." Lauren didn't insist. She returned home exhausted, with sore feet and stiff hands from all the dough mixing. She lay on the kitchen floor, the same place where she had slept on the first night. But now there was something different, a painful but real pride. She was winning, one tamale at a time. Days later, she went to the town market looking for more corn and seasonings. There she saw a young woman sitting on the sidewalk with a baby in her arms. Her gaze was low, but alert. Lauren approached her and asked if she needed work. The young woman hesitated, then nodded. "My name is Rebecca. I ran away from my husband. He was bad," she said, without going into details. Lauren didn't ask questions. She just bought a loaf of bread and shared it with her. The next day, Rebecca was already in the kitchen before the sun came up. Timid, careful, she worked in silence, but with gratitude evident in her gestures. Little by little, Lauren started teaching her old recipes, the ones she had learned from her grandmother on those hot afternoons of her childhood. Together, they created a new flavor with pumpkin flowers and goat cheese. The smell was gentle, and the taste surprised. The villagers tried it and praised it with enthusiasm. Lauren observed each reaction and, in silence, understood. She wasn't just selling food. She was building something bigger, something that was finally hers. It wasn't just customers looking for food. There were locals, shopkeepers, and even passing tourists who came to meet the woman with the tamales. Her name was now circulating in conversations, at coffee tables, and in neighborly circles. One afternoon, while closing the stand with Rebecca, a man in a worn blazer and a small notebook in his hands approached. He was from the organization behind the local food fair, a simple but traditional event in the region. He extended the invitation directly. "We want you and your tamales at the fair this year. People talk about you like you're a legend." Lauren hesitated. She had never participated in anything like that. A fair, to her, was a place where she bought soap and corn, not where she presented herself. But Rebecca looked at her with that contained sparkle, a faint smile that begged for something new. And so, Lauren took a deep breath and agreed. They spent the entire week preparing. They chose the flavors with more care than ever before. Lauren redid the recipes, tried different combinations, adjusted the seasonings. Rebecca helped in silence, but with precision. They also picked fresh flowers, sunflowers, and daisies to decorate the stand. It wasn't just decoration. It was a sign of a new beginning, a signal that this place was full of life, despite everything. On the day of the fair, the atmosphere was festive. Stalls were set up everywhere, live music played, and children ran between the aisles. There were smells of empanadas, sweets, grilled meats. Lauren felt intimidated when she saw the structure of the other stands. Colorful tents, illuminated signs, loudspeakers. Hers was simple, but it had color, it had smell, it had soul. And that made all the difference. In the first few hours, Lauren's stand began to attract attention. The tamales were carefully arranged, each one wrapped in fresh leaves and placed in wicker baskets. The aroma spread like an invitation. People approached, tried them, smiled. In less than 3 hours, nothing was left. Sold out. Everything. In the midst of the hustle, a gray-haired man with a refined palate and an accent from the capital stopped in front of the stand. He was a chef from Mexico City. He ordered 2 tamales. He ate them standing up. Then he looked Lauren in the eyes and said, "This is what I call authenticity. What's your contact information?" She didn't have a business card. She hurriedly searched for something and wrote down her phone number on a napkin. When he left, Lauren was left with trembling hands. She didn't know if it was real or if she should trust it, but she knew that something different had just happened. With the money from the fair, Lauren and Rebecca went to a store in town. They bought new pots, 2 embroidered aprons, and a bigger tent for the square. Rebecca, for the first time in weeks, laughed out loud when she tried on the blue apron with a chicken print. It was the first genuine laugh since they had entered each other's lives. That night, Lauren couldn't sleep. She lay there, staring at the dark ceiling, thinking about something she had never allowed herself to think, to dream. A community kitchen, a space where other women could learn, cook, and sell. It was a big idea, maybe too big, but not impossible. On the local radio, they started talking about her again. A shopkeeper from another village called to offer a partnership. He wanted to sell Lauren's tamales in his small store. She accepted without hesitation. Soon enough, she and Rebecca were on the road, in a borrowed cart, with a cooler full of tamales and a trunk full of hope. At every stop, they noticed the looks of women in aprons, others with children in their arms, others from afar just watching. Some came closer and asked almost shyly, "Are you hiring?" Lauren looked at Rebecca and understood. They had reached a point where they couldn't go back. They were becoming something bigger, something that carried more than flavor. It carried stories that needed to be told. On an overcast afternoon, sitting on the kitchen doorstep, Lauren called 2 women who always appeared nearby, but had never had the courage to fully approach. The first was Diana, a soft-spoken woman with calloused hands who had lost her husband in a truck accident a few months earlier. The second was Abigail, a young woman, her face always hidden behind her hair, recently arrived in the village after fleeing from the big city. Lauren didn't ask any questions. She simply said, "If you want to work with me, there's space in the kitchen. It's simple, but it's real." Both accepted with tears in their eyes. Diana squeezed Lauren's hand tightly, as if thanking her for something much bigger than a job. Abigail simply nodded, without saying a word, but with eyes filled with unspoken emotions. The kitchen transformed. It was no longer just the place where tamales were made. It was a place of support, a space where stories were exchanged while the dough was stirred, where heavy silences found comfort in the sound of the firewood crackling. Lauren watched it all with attention, and little by little, she understood. She wasn't just forming a team, she was creating a home, and in some way, she was rebuilding herself. Rebecca, always attentive to the details Lauren didn't notice, suggested a name for the group that was forming. "Why don't we call it Flavors of Lauren? That's what people are already calling it out there." Lauren let out a quick, embarrassed laugh. She thought it was pretentious. But when she saw Diana painting the name on a cloth banner with red letters and flowers around it, she didn't have the heart to contest. The name stayed. It was like a seal, simple, organic, true. With the help of a local mason, they renovated one of the rooms in the old farm and set up the first community kitchen. It was basic, with a wood stove, a large wooden table, and shelves made from crates. But the smell of corn cooking in the air made everything feel more welcoming. It was humble, yes, but it was theirs. Lauren divided the tasks with precision. Each person had a clear role. Some mixed the dough, others prepared the fillings. Rebecca wrote down the orders and organized the deliveries. The profits were shared equally. For the first time in their lives, these women had their own money, autonomy, a voice. The group was invited to participate in a food event in Oaxaca. It was the first time they all left together as a team. They took traditional flavors and the newer ones, like the pumpkin flour tamale with creamy cheese and smoked chili. By the end of the afternoon, they were called to the stage. They won the prize for Best Regional Tamale. Lauren went up to speak with her heart pounding. The words came out trembling but true. "We're not chefs. We're women who learned to turn pain into recipes." Standing ovation, Diana cried. Abigail hid her face. Rebecca smiled with her eyes full of tears. Back at the farm, there were more orders than they could handle, but they didn't complain. It was a good problem to have. Lauren began planning the expansion, while Rebecca took care of the financial side with colorful notebooks and organized spreadsheets. Soon enough, their names appeared in a national news article. A journalist wrote, "Group of women turns corn into strength and income." In the following days, letters, text messages, and modest donations started arriving. Women from all over Mexico reached out asking for help. They wanted to learn, start over, cook. Lauren read each message with tearful eyes. Some signatures only included a name and a request. "Teach me?" With the money they had raised, they bought more pots, renovated the kitchen, and opened more space for others. Lauren looked at Rebecca on an ordinary afternoon, while they were washing already worn utensils, and said, "Now we're more than cooks, we're seeds for the future." Rebecca just smiled. There was nothing else to say. The warmth of the new kitchen was still recent when Rebecca hurried into the room, holding a large, colorful envelope. Lauren was stirring a pot of dough, sweating and focused, when she heard, "You won't believe what just arrived." It was an official invitation, with a logo, signature, and everything. A TV station from Oaxaca wanted Lauren to appear on a cooking show. Cook live, tell her story, and show the country the flavors that had transformed her life. Lauren read the letter twice in silence. Then she looked at Rebecca. Me in front of a camera. No way. They'll laugh at me. Rebecca smiled calmly, as though she had been expecting this reaction. She sat down next to her and replied, "You've faced worse. It's not the cameras that will bring you down now." It was days of hesitation. Lauren didn't feel ready, nor worthy, but the group insisted. They said her story wasn't just hers, it was everyone's. So the next weekend, she traveled to Oaxaca with Rebecca and two of the newer cooks. She entered the studio with her heart in her throat, but her hands steady. She put on the embroidered apron and took a deep breath. During the recording, Lauren cooked as if she were in her community kitchen. She prepared the pumpkin flour tamale, explained the process, and told her journey without embellishments, without playing the victim. She spoke of the abandoned farm, the pain, the rebuilding, and the other women. The audience sat in silence, listening attentively. The judges praised the flavor, the texture, and one of them, moved, said, "This tamale has more than just corn. It has memory." The episode aired on a Sunday evening. The next day, Rebecca's phone didn't stop vibrating. Dozens of messages, invitations, and compliments poured in. Food fairs, workshops, meetings for women entrepreneurs. Everyone wanted Lauren. They wanted to meet the woman who turned corn into dignity. Rebecca began to organize a schedule. Lauren, now used to traveling, started to hit the road. She visited communities, met other cooks, shared techniques, learned variations, and heard stories from women as strong as they were forgotten. Everywhere she went, she left a seed, an idea, a recipe, a hope. In Guadalajara, on an ordinary afternoon, Evan sat in front of the television. He changed channels aimlessly until he stopped on a program re-airing the episode from Oaxaca. Lauren's face appeared on the screen. He froze. His eyes were fixed. He saw the woman he had once called dead weight being applauded. Evan looked older now. His hair was graying, his features hardened. He was alone, surrounded by silence and regret. He said nothing. He only watched. Meanwhile, Lauren was oblivious. She was in Oaxaca, wearing her apron, teaching a group of women how to roll tamales with banana leaves. The kitchen now involved more than 20 families. It had become a center of learning, emotional support, and income. No one was invisible there. Over time, Lauren began to dream bigger. She wanted a foundation, a larger space with free courses for women in vulnerable situations, to use cooking as a tool for autonomy and healing. Rebecca supported the idea with enthusiasm and spreadsheets. She was the one balancing dreams with numbers. A large food company, aware of the attention Lauren was receiving, offered sponsorship. But Lauren refused. She didn't want the project to become advertising. She didn't want to lose its essence. "If we give up the soul, it becomes just another factory," she told Rebecca, who agreed with a nod. They set up a simple website where they shared their story and received online donations. With the money they raised, they opened a second community kitchen in Puebla. The smell of fresh corn became part of the lives of new women, new children, and other stories starting over. Sometime later, Lauren decided to visit the village where it all began. She walked alone through the square where she had sold her first tamale. She sat on the same wooden bench, watched the activity, and listened to the voices of children playing. Time seemed to have left the scenery unchanged, but she knew. She was no longer the same woman. She cried there, alone, not out of sadness, but out of gratitude and courage. And for the first time, she wasn't afraid of the future. The bench in the square was still warm when Lauren got up and walked back to the farm. The wind blew gently, as if it wanted to whisper that her story was no longer just hers. In the following days, with the help of Rebecca, Diana, Abigail, and many others who came afterward, Lauren finished the preparations for something that, years earlier, would have been unimaginable: the inauguration of the Flavors of Lauren Foundation. The ceremony was simple, just as she wanted. No stage, no microphones. A string of colorful banners decorated the yard of the new headquarters, built with donations and a lot of collective work. Women from various towns arrived. Some came with children in their arms, others by ride, some by night bus. There were calloused hands, skeptical gazes, but one thing united them all: hope. The hope of a new beginning. Lauren climbed onto a wooden crate to be seen by everyone. She wore the same blue apron from the first kitchen. She didn't give a rehearsed speech. She spoke with a firm voice and an exposed heart. Here, no one is invisible. Here, no one carries the world alone. the foundation began offering weekly classes. Lauren divided her time between teaching preparation techniques, preservation methods, and plating dishes, but she also reserved space to talk about resistance, dignity, and self-love. During the lessons, the women listened in silence. Some cried without making a sound. Others, for the first time, allowed themselves to smile. It was in this rhythm that the invitation came for the food festival in Monterey. It was one of the biggest in the country. Lauren accepted, accompanied by Rebecca and 2 helpers from the new group. They cooked live on the main stage. They presented the ancestral tamale with smoked leaves and black bean filling. The audience applauded not only the flavor, but also the story they carried. The emotion was visible in every gaze that met theirs. The press covered the event with enthusiasm. The headline the next day was direct and powerful. From abandoned to leader, Lauren and her corn empire. Her name spread across social media, television, and people's phones, resonating with those who identified with her journey. With the exposure, international invitations started to arrive. An NGO from Peru wanted to bring Lauren to learn about a project with Andean women, but she declined respectfully. She said her place was in Mexico, where there were still many forgotten people waiting to be heard. Rebecca, as always, respected her decision and took care of the details with added attention. It was at this peak moment that Rebecca's phone rang. On the other end, the silence lasted only briefly. "It's him," Rebecca said, after hanging up, her face pale. Her ex-husband had tracked her down. Lauren acted without hesitation. She hired a lawyer, reinforced the kitchen security, and changed the locks. The women came together like a block. They organized a nighttime vigil, set up a support network, and made sure Rebecca would never be unprotected again. Lauren realized that in that moment, the project was no longer just an idea, it had become a shield, and those women together knew how to protect one another. A few weeks later, Lauren traveled to Chiapas. She wanted to visit indigenous communities, learn forgotten recipes, and listen to voices that no one ever heard. She was offered a tamale made with cocoa beans and black pepper. She cried when she tasted it. It was living history. She promised she would give visibility to those cooks, to those women whose knowledge had never reached television. When she returned, Lauren began recording videos teaching traditional recipes. They set up a YouTube channel with the help of young people from the community. Within days, the videos went viral. Young people from all over the country started following, commenting, and cooking at home with their mothers and grandmothers. The tradition was spreading, alive and pulsating. One day, Lauren received a simple letter, handwritten on yellowed paper. It was from Rebecca's mother. It said, "Thank you for bringing my daughter back to the world." Lauren read it carefully. She took a sheet of paper and responded with a single sentence, "Here, no one walks alone." The letter from Rebecca's mother was still on the table when Lauren received an unexpected visit from a deliveryman. He brought a brown envelope with no return address. Inside, there was only a folded sheet of paper with handwriting Lauren hadn't seen in years. She recognized it immediately. Evan. It contained only a few words. "I'm in Oaxaca. I need to talk to you, please." Her heart didn't race. She simply nodded in silence, as though she had known that this day would come. She told Rebecca about it at the end of the day while they were washing dishes. The reaction was immediate. "You're not going, are you?" Rebecca asked, holding the damp cloth in her hand, her expression hard. Lauren didn't respond immediately. The other women, who had been listening from a distance, also expressed concern. No one there saw any reason to pay attention to the man who had discarded Lauren as if she were nothing. But Lauren, with the calm only time had given her, said, "I'll listen. That's all." She scheduled the meeting at a simple cafe in downtown Oaxaca, a place with no pretense, with large windows and old wooden tables. She arrived 10 minutes early. She sat by the window, wearing a white linen blouse, her hair tied back with a floral scarf. Elegant, serene. When Evan entered, he looked like a broken man. He was thin, his clothes wrinkled, his eyes sunken. He nervously twirled a worn cap between his fingers. Lauren didn't get up. She simply watched him sit across from her. He tried to smile but couldn't. He took a while to speak. When he finally did, his voice trembled. I was wrong about everything. He spoke of the company's bankruptcy, bad investments, betrayal from partners. He said that the woman he had left Lauren for had left him months ago, that he was sick, that his friends had disappeared, that he had no place to stay. I know I don't deserve anything. I just wanted you to listen to me. And he cried. He lowered his head, his hands covering his face. Lauren watched him as one would watch the end of a play that no longer moved them. She waited for the silence to stretch before responding. You gave me a sack of corn, she said, without bitterness, but without sweetness. He raised his eyes, confused. She continued, with that corn I fed women, children, stories. With it I built what you thought you were taking from me. Now it's your turn to plant. Plant what you want to harvest. Evan couldn't say anything else. He simply lowered his head, defeated. Lauren didn't offer him money, nor a place to stay. She only gave him a firm, conclusive look. She stood up calmly, grabbed her bag, and left, without looking back. She returned to the community kitchen in the late afternoon. She found Rebecca organizing the ingredients, as she always did. She embraced her tightly. I closed the last chapter. Now I only write what I want to live. That night, there was no official celebration, but the women felt something different in the air. It was no longer about food nor fame. It was about freedom. The freedom to not carry a burden that no longer belonged to them. Lauren went to bed early, with a light body and a peaceful heart. The next day, she received a new invitation, a lecture at the University of Guadalajara. The theme, entrepreneurship and female empathy. The woman who had once been told she only took up space was now a reference of strength and transformation. At the university, she spoke to a full auditorium. Young people took notes, older women quietly cried, and Lauren, without reading, without memorizing, simply said, "It's not about cooking, it's about standing up. Tamales are just the beginning. The rest is revolution." The routine at the foundation ran at the pace Lauren had dreamed, intense but harmonious. The community kitchens were running, the volunteer internship program had worked out, and young people from all over Mexico were signing up to participate. The classes were taking place, stories were crossing paths, and the flavors were spreading. But it was there, at the peak of tranquility, that the first noise appeared. An important delivery for an event in Veracruz simply didn't arrive. Lauren only found out from an irritated call from one of the organizers, who said they had received the wrong tamales with the wrong ingredients and in smaller quantities than agreed. Rebecca tried to justify it. She had passed on the details to one of the new coordinators and thought someone had changed the order. But Lauren felt something strange in that moment. Rebecca never made mistakes. 2 days later, a box of donations disappeared from the Puebla headquarters. No one could explain. It was a shipment of kitchen utensils and new aprons sent by a group of supporters from the north. The invoice confirmed the shipment, but at the kitchen, nothing had arrived. Lauren started to suspect communication failures between the branches until she noticed another detail. A group of interns had been transferred to the wrong headquarters without her authorization. The approval document was signed with her name, but she had never seen that paper. That night, Lauren stayed up late reviewing reports. She opened old folders, searched email records, and checked agenda notes. And for the first time since she had started everything, she felt a pang of fear. The mistakes no longer seemed isolated. There was something linking them together, a series of almost imperceptible failures, but when put together, they were beginning to form a pattern. In the following days, the atmosphere between the women shifted. Some seemed more distrustful, others were quieter than usual. One of the older cooks, named Nancy, asked to leave without explaining why. She said she needed to step away for a while. Lauren tried to ask, but Nancy just looked away and said, "There are things you haven't seen yet, but you will." That echoed like a warning. Lauren didn't sleep that night. She began to notice small details. Printed documents with notes that weren't hers, duplicate payments, a purchase approved with an unusually high amount. Even the stock at the Oaxaca headquarters seemed to have expired ingredients mixed with fresh ones. Doubt started to settle in like rust. Lauren had always been cautious by nature, but she had always trusted the women who had built this journey alongside her. Now, for the first time, she felt something breaking. She looked at the kitchen's bulletin board. Photos of the women from the foundation smiled in spontaneous poses, but there, between the smiles, Lauren could no longer see only faces of trust. She began to wonder, was someone sabotaging the project from within? She didn't speak to anyone. She didn't accuse anyone. She simply kept quiet and began to observe everything with new eyes. That same week, when she found a report with 2 pages ripped out, Lauren knew. This wasn't a coincidence. Something or someone was trying to destabilize what she had built. In the days following the incidents, Lauren walked differently. Her steps through the kitchen were the same, but her eyes no longer held the same lightness. She observed everything. She listened more than she spoke. She avoided long conversations. She answered carefully. It was as if the trust she had built so painstakingly had silently cracked from within. The women at the foundation still smiled, but something had changed. The laughter was more subdued. The exchanged glances seemed heavier. Lauren could feel it. She knew something was out of place. The problem was not knowing where or who. One late afternoon, sitting by the flower bed she had planted recently, Lauren held a notebook on her lap, mentally listing all the possibilities. Who had access to the documents? Who controlled the financial side? Who approved emails and orders? She crossed names, retraced paths, but nothing seemed clear enough. The clues were fragile, the mistakes always attributed to human error, and that was what scared her the most. The project had grown too big, and she knew trust was a luxury when you carried so much responsibility. Rebecca noticed Lauren's distant behavior, but didn't insist. She stayed there, always present, organizing the accounts, overseeing the new groups, managing the spreadsheets. But Lauren, for the first time, hesitated to give her complete trust. She also hesitated to doubt. That was the cruelest part of it all. Doubt didn't make a sound, but it ate away inside. Then, one Saturday morning, Lauren did what she never thought she would have to do. She sought help from outside. She went to town and scheduled a meeting with an old acquaintance from the days when she was still doing local events, when the project began to grow, Julian Herrera. Former tax auditor, now working as a consultant and private investigator. He knew the ins and outs of foundations, NGOs, and small businesses. Discreet, precise. Lauren was direct. I'm being sabotaged, but I don't know by whom, and I can't act in the dark. Julian didn't ask unnecessary questions. He simply asked for time, access to internal documents, email records, activity reports, and a complete list of the leadership in each branch of the foundation. I'll need to circulate within the structure as if I were an administrative consultant. If anyone knows the real reason, they may interfere, Lauren agreed. It wasn't easy. It felt like she was hiding a secret within her own home. But she needed to protect what she had built. And more than that, she needed to protect the women who depended on it, even from those who might be behind the errors. That night she returned to the farm and turned off the lights early. But she didn't sleep. She spent hours staring at the ceiling, listening to the wind outside, and thinking about everything she could lose. And worse, who she might lose. The following Monday, Julian showed up at the Foundation's headquarters as an external consultant. He began reviewing the processes, speaking with the leadership, attending meetings, asking simple but strategic questions. No one seemed suspicious, but Lauren knew that something was coming, and the fear of the answer was greater than the desire to know. She just didn't know if she was ready to learn what that was. 2 weeks after Julian started circulating among the Foundation's units, Lauren felt the weight of the silence growing. He moved with ease, reviewed files, participated in meetings, asked simple but strategic questions. No one seemed to suspect. But Lauren knew that something was approaching, and the fear of the answer was greater than the desire to know. On the third Monday, Julian called her into a closed room in the simple office that functioned as the headquarters of the main branch. He carried a thin folder, neatly organized, and wore a serious expression that left no room for distraction. Lauren sat in silence. He opened the documents. "I need you to take a deep breath, Lauren. What I've found so far, it's not definitive, but it's serious." She nodded. Julian began to present the evidence, one by one. The first piece was a chain of internal emails about the Vera Cruz order. The approval date, according to the server records, didn't match the printed document. Someone had modified the system later, the account that made the modification. It was linked to an email address that Rebecca used for urgent administrative matters, an old one, but still active, which Lauren thought was deactivated. The second piece of evidence was the most disturbing. A meeting report about the Foundation's expansion, filed in the system with Lauren's electronic signature, had been sent to an international NGO under a different name, Red de Sabores del Sur. A new project with a very similar structure to the original Foundation, and with Rebecca listed as the executive director. Lauren froze. Her hand went to her mouth, her eyes fixed on the document. The date of the email was just over 2 months ago. The project hadn't progressed, but the intent was there, recorded. Could it be a mistake? She tried to ask. Maybe an alternate plan without ill intent. Julian carefully closed the folder. Lauren, this isn't just an indication. It's structure. A CNPJ was created under her name. There's preliminary movement. What it seems like, and I say this cautiously, is that there's an intention to build something parallel with the same foundation. Lauren's head spun. It was as if the ground was being pulled out from under her. That explained the duplicate data, the disappearances, the unacknowledged errors. She wanted to shout, but couldn't. She simply sat there, silent, feeling the world she had built tremble from within. She is Rebecca. I trusted her with everything, Lauren whispered. And maybe that's why it was so easy for her to act, Julian replied, without malice, just with precision. Lauren asked for some time. She left the room and walked out to the Foundation's balcony. The sky was cloudy. The cooks were chatting in the background, unaware of what was about to change. What if it's true, she thought. What if she wanted all of this for herself? The pain was different now. It wasn't the loss of the project. It was the feeling of being betrayed by someone she had pulled from the ground, someone she had taken in, someone who had been part of every piece of her rebuilding. That night, Lauren didn't speak to Rebecca, not to anyone. She simply locked the main room, grabbed an old notebook, and wrote a single question at the top of the page. What if the enemy is the one you taught to fight? The next morning, Lauren woke up before the sun. She sat on the edge of the bed, her feet on the cold floor, her hands clasped, her chest tight. She had made a decision, but that didn't make it any easier. The weight of doubt was still enormous, but silence was no longer an option. What the Foundation represented couldn't be compromised by anyone, not even Rebecca. She arrived at the Foundation's headquarters without saying a word. The women greeted her as usual, and she responded with a subtle nod. Rebecca was in the administrative office, focused on the week's financial reports. Lauren watched her through the slightly open door for a few seconds. Everything seemed the same, but it wasn't. She took a deep breath and walked in. "Rebecca, we need to talk, just the two of us." Rebecca looked up, surprised by her tone. She put down her pen and straightened in her chair. "Of course." Lauren calmly closed the door. She sat in front of her. There was an abyss between them, even though the air seemed still. "Serious things are happening here, Rebecca, and I have reasons to believe they're coming from inside the team," Lauren began, her voice firm but low. "Things that are putting everything at risk." Rebecca furrowed her brow, confused. "What do you mean? Do you think someone is—" Lauren stopped her with a restrained gesture. "Rebecca, there are records, documents, emails, even a foundation proposal with your name on it. All of this, without my knowledge, and even without a direct confrontation, I need to protect this project." The silence that followed was unbearable. Rebecca sat still, then she looked away. She didn't deny it. She didn't confirm it. She simply remained silent, her eyes moist, her breath held. "I can't believe you think that about me," she murmured finally. Lauren felt the words pierce her chest, but she kept her tone steady. "I'm not judging you as a person. I'm acting as the woman who carries the responsibility for more than 100 families. I can't ignore this. I can't pretend nothing is happening. And as much as it hurts—" She paused. Rebecca looked at her, now with tears running down her face. "You're out of the foundation, Rebecca." Those words seemed to dismantle something inside both of them. Rebecca slowly stood up. She didn't yell. She didn't ask for explanations. She simply stood there, silent, as if waiting for Lauren to say that she was joking. But Lauren didn't say anything. They both knew there was no room for half-truths. "I just wanted to help," Rebecca whispered. "You don't know everything. Maybe I don't. But today, I need to act on what I know." Rebecca nodded slowly. She grabbed her backpack from the corner of the room and walked to the door. Before leaving, she stopped, looked at Lauren one last time, and said, "I hope one day you understand." And she left. Lauren stayed seated, motionless. She felt the absence fill the room like a silent storm. After hearing the gate close, she let her body slide off the chair. She sat on the floor and cried, alone, for the first time in a long time. Not out of anger, but out of grief, for the friendship that had broken, for the bond that had snapped, for what seemed to be true and maybe wasn't. Later, when she returned to the kitchen, no one commented on what had happened, but the silence spoke loudly. The women felt the emptiness. Lauren simply said that she had made a difficult but necessary decision and moved on. The hours after Rebecca's departure seemed to drag on like chains. The foundation continued to operate. The classes went on, the donations kept coming, but Lauren became quieter, more introspective. Everything she did was now accompanied by a strange, almost suffocating feeling. Guilt. She tried to shake the thought that she might have made a mistake, but at night, alone, she reread the reports, the intercepted messages, the evidence, and felt that something still didn't add up. Julian, attentive as ever, noticed Lauren's discomfort during the meetings. One day, before leaving, he said, "I can keep investigating if you want. On a broader scale, there are some details in those document shipments that bother me." Lauren nodded, almost ashamed to admit that deep down she hoped he would uncover another truth. And so Julian began to dig deeper. It was then that an unexpected lead surfaced. While analyzing the digital shipments, he traced an IP address from a different location in the documents related to the Red de Sabores del Sur project. The address didn't come from the foundation's headquarters, but from a small commercial office registered in Guadalajara. The location matched a recently opened business which had already been listed as inactive and which, under a third-party name, was connected to a fund that had once been a partner of Evan's old company. Julian brought the information to Lauren without any hesitation. "This address, it's directly linked to your ex-husband. I don't know how yet, but it's clear that he's moved something behind all of this." Lauren froze. Her body went cold. Evan's name was a memory she had sealed away, a past she thought no longer had the power to affect her. But there he was again, lurking like a shadow of what he had tried to destroy. "No," she whispered, still unable to believe it. "Why?" Julian didn't answer, but she knew. Evan had never been able to bear the fact that even after being left with nothing, Lauren had built everything. Alone, with a sack of corn and dignity. In the following days, Julian combed through public records. He found financial movements tied to the ghost office in Guadalajara and 2 transfers made under the name of a temporary collaborator who had worked at the Puebla Foundation and who had been a former legal assistant of Evan. The pieces began to fit. One by one, Evan had planted people, created documents, made it seem as though Rebecca wanted to take Lauren's place. He knew exactly where to strike. Trust. Lauren closed her eyes when she heard everything. He wanted to separate me from her. And he almost succeeded. The pain was immense, but now anger had joined it. Lauren felt that someone had tried to erase everything she had started, not for money, but for wounded pride, for pettiness. She got up, looked out the window of the foundation's office, where life was still flowing with the smell of corn in the air. The women were laughing in groups, as they always did. But someone was missing. "I need to find her," she said, her voice firm. "Rebecca?" asked Julian. Lauren nodded. "Before I seek justice with him, I need to ask for forgiveness from her." Lauren asked one of the cooks who had kept in touch with Rebecca for her address. She received a short message. She's okay, but doesn't want anything to do with anyone from the foundation. Still, Lauren went. She took a simple bus, got off 3 neighborhoods before, and walked the rest of the way on foot, without warning, without justifying herself. She needed to look Rebecca in the eyes. She needed to fix what she had broken, what she had allowed to break. The house was small, rented by a distant uncle on the outskirts of Oaxaca. It had a crooked wooden fence and a pot with herbs in the window. Lauren hesitated before the gate. Her heart pounded. But she took a deep breath and knocked twice. Rebecca opened the door. Their eyes met. Rebecca didn't say anything. She didn't invite Lauren in. She simply stood there, motionless, with a neutral expression. But her eyes were hurt. "I had to come," Lauren said. "I need to tell you the truth." Rebecca crossed her arms, waiting. Lauren began to speak, her voice low but steady. She told her everything, the discoveries about Julian, the investigation, the office in Guadalajara, the evidence linking Evan to the documents, the diversions, the manipulations. Rebecca didn't interrupt. Only after Lauren finished, with tear-filled eyes and a choked voice, did Rebecca ask, "And you really believed I would do that?" Lauren lowered her gaze. "I believed what seemed most logical, and I forgot to trust what was truest." The silence that followed was thick, but not bitter. Rebecca took a deep breath. She quickly wiped away a tear, turned, and opened the gate slowly. "Come in." Lauren obeyed without saying anything. She sat in a wooden chair, wedged between an old fridge and a rusty stove. Rebecca made coffee. They sat face to face, the words still stuck in their throats. "I don't blame you for doubting me," Rebecca finally said. "It just hurt. Because you were the one who taught me to believe in new beginnings. And suddenly, it seemed like all of that had been a lie." Lauren held the cup with both hands, as though it was the only way to keep herself steady. "I made a mistake, Rebecca, and I don't know how to fix it. Start by denouncing him." Lauren looked up, surprised. Evan tried to destroy more than just a project. He messed with all of our lives. He made you turn against me, and he made me doubt myself. And that has to have consequences. Lauren nodded slowly. She felt the weight of the responsibility, but also the lightness of forgiveness beginning to form between the two of them. A forgiveness without direct words, but present in Rebecca's gesture of making the coffee, of opening the gate, of saying, "Come in." "He'll pay for everything he tried to do," Lauren said, "but first I needed to fix this. This here. Us." Rebecca didn't smile, but her eyes were no longer hard. There was a new beginning there, quieter, more mature, like everything that is true. "You didn't lose me, Lauren. You just pushed me away, but I was waiting for you to come." Lauren took a deep breath, her eyes filled with tears. For the first time in weeks, she felt the air fill her lungs completely. That afternoon, the two of them stayed in silence, side by side, without needing to say much. When Lauren left, she promised, "Tomorrow I'll go to the public ministry, not for me, for all of us." Rebecca embraced her. It was the longest hug they had shared since the foundation began. The courtroom in Oaxaca was colder than Lauren had expected. The white lights, the hard benches, the muted murmurs of lawyers and journalists gave that morning a dry, bureaucratic tone, but for her, everything there felt personal. Sitting in the front row, her fingers intertwined and her heart steady, Lauren was waiting for only one thing: truth recognized. The formal complaint against Evan had been accepted a few weeks before. With the evidence presented by Julian, forged documents, suspicious financial transactions, an attempt to create a parallel project to harm the foundation, the public ministry hadn't hesitated. It was clear Evan had acted with malice, using third parties and manipulating information to destabilize what Lauren had built. Rebecca was sitting next to Lauren, back by her side. The two hadn't left each other since the reunion. The entire team had welcomed Rebecca back with tears in their eyes and a spontaneous round of applause in the kitchen at the main headquarters. No one asked questions. No one judged. They knew. It was as if the original fabric had been sewn back together with scars, yes, but firm. In the courtroom, Evan was unrecognizable. His suit was wrinkled, his hair messy, his face worn. He didn't look at Lauren, not once. He avoided everyone's gaze, even when his name was spoken aloud. The hearing was brief. The evidence was strong. The defense was weak. There was no way to deny the records, the digital traces, the fraudulent connections. Evan tried to blame a former employee, insinuate a setup, but the judge wasn't moved. It is evident that the defendant orchestrated actions with the aim of directly and systematically harming a legitimate social project, with consequences in the lives of dozens of women in vulnerable situations, declared the judge before announcing the sentence. Evan was convicted of fraud, document forgery, and conspiracy for illicit purposes. He received a sentence of semi-open imprisonment and a fine proportional to the damages caused to the foundation. But more than the sentence, what marked Lauren was the moment when she stood up, looked at him, and without bitterness said, "You tried to leave me with a sack of corn. I turned it into bread for many tables. And today, despite everything you tried, I'm still standing." Evan lowered his head. He didn't say anything, and for the first time Lauren felt that this cycle was truly closed. The next day, the foundation celebrated with a simple, collective lunch, filled with flavors from each woman's hometown. Lauren didn't give a speech. Rebecca didn't either. But as they walked together between the tables, embraced, the applause came again this time, spontaneous, happy, full of recognition. In the months that followed, the foundation's actions grew. 2 new kitchens were opened in rural areas of the Guerrero state. Rebecca took on the national coordination of the units. Lauren began to give talks on restorative justice and female reconstruction in educational spaces. The name Flavors of Lauren was no longer just a brand. It had become a symbol. At one of the classes, when a young woman asked if Lauren regretted forgiving and starting over, she responded with a smile. "Regret is something for those who are afraid to feel. I'd rather feel even the pain. Because it was pain that taught me the taste of victory." And so, with a clean soul and a full kitchen, Lauren moved forward, not to erase the past, but to transform it every day into food and a path. The house at the farm in Oaxaca was now different. The weeds that once covered the yard had given way to an organized garden with tomatoes, peppers, and colorful flowers planted by Lauren's own hands. The wood stove still stood in the same place, renovated, but with the marks of time preserved as beautiful scars. A wooden bench under the shade of a lemon tree became Lauren's favorite corner to start the day. There was no longer any rush. The foundation was strong, with Rebecca leading the national management. 32 community kitchens spread across Mexico, all operating, all with women leading, teaching and learning. The volunteer internship program was now an official part of public universities. Young people came from other Latin American countries to learn. And Lauren chose silence. She remained present, but in a different way. She visited each unit without warning, helped in the kitchen, sat with the newcomers, listened to their stories. She wrote handwritten letters to local leaders. She recorded short videos with reflections on life, food, and new beginnings. She had a monthly column in a cultural newspaper where she shared recipes with memories. The YouTube channel stayed active with simple recordings. Lauren in the kitchen. That was enough. Evan served his sentence in silence. He never tried to contact Lauren, and she didn't want that. Justice had been done. The forgiveness inside her was already complete. He no longer had any part in the equation, not as a wound, not as a memory. Rebecca and Lauren remained more united than ever. The trust between them was rebuilt slowly, with maturity. There were no more idealizations. There was respect. Rebecca lived near the main headquarters with her son growing healthy and bright. She called Lauren Aunt, with that freedom only children have. On a clear sky Sunday, Lauren was invited to speak at the inauguration of a new kitchen in San Luis Potosí. She refused the microphone. She walked among the women, listening to each one tell her story. An elderly woman, 74 years old, said she had been selling tamales for 50 years, but it was only now that she felt her voice had value. A young indigenous woman, who had never spoken in public, recited a poem in her language about the strength of hands that feed. Lauren simply listened. She cried. She applauded. She hugged them, and returned home that same day in silence, with a full heart. That night, she wrote for the last time in the old notebook she had kept since the beginning of her journey. The cover was already faded, the pages, some loose, but that was where she kept everything she felt. She wrote, "I arrived here with a sack of corn, an old stove, and a broken world. Today I have what no company could ever give me, roots. And it's not about winning. It's about moving forward with dignity, even when the road is dirt. I planted with pain, watered with tears, but harvested what matters. Women standing tall, people hungry for justice, flavors that heal, and peace. Finally, peace." She closed the notebook. She looked out the kitchen window, and with a light smile, she let the silence speak for her. Lauren's story had begun with abandonment, but it ended with belonging. It wasn't an end, it was a table set, for whatever came, and for whoever needed it.